Welcome to the Chinese Medicine Podcast with your host Marie Hopkinson, Chinese medicine practitioner.
Hi, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast, and on today's episode I'm joined by Dr. Simon Feeney. He's the Director of Empirical Health and a Chinese medicine physician, and he's going to talk to us today about quality and safety with Chinese herbal medicines and the state of our industry in Australia. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much for having me, Marie.
Awesome.
Yeah,
this is so
excited.
cool. Yeah, and we're in beautiful Melbourne today. You can probably see the nice view out the window. It's such a great little city here, well, a big city. And what we want to talk about today is the different kinds of Chinese medicines that you might be able to get your hands on from different practitioners, and the different qualities that are around with Chinese herbs. So Simon's an expert in that field, and he also has founded his business, Empirical Health Herbs. So do you want to give our listeners a little bit of a background of how you got into the herbs business?
Absolutely. So basically, as a clinician, I was practicing in clinic and wanted to get better and better quality herbs for my patients, for my friends, for my family, and so I started searching around for the best quality herbs I could find, and got to a certain level where it was, well, this needs some sort of certification, or as we started the organic industry started coming up, this wild crafting industry started coming up, which is just herbs that are harvested in the wild, and obviously this has a better quality not only therapeutically but also from a safety point of view. We've got lots of issues that are happening in the environment at the moment, heavy metal contamination, lots of use of chemicals, pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, all these sort of things. So, it was a growing concern in China and also for Australia as well, well, internationally really, yeah. So in order to find those better quality herbs, I just started searching for the best quality herbs, and now we have an international community. Thanks to the internet, we were able to access those things, and so I came across a company in the United States called Springwind, and the director's name's Andy Ellis. So Andy Ellis, and I connected to each other, and we started collaborating with him, and to bring some of those herbs into Australia. So
awesome. Yeah, fantastic. And so Simon's company is the first company in Australia to bring in a certain level of standard that didn't exist before your company has brought that in, right?
Yeah, there was some companies prior to us that were doing pesticide tests due to some of the other standards that were happening in Taiwan and in China, but we were the first people to bring in herbs that were completely free of pesticides, so non-detectable levels.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And look, some people probably watching the podcast may take the herbs in lots of different ways. So herbs come in like pills and powders, and they can be pre-packaged, or your practitioner might make them up individually for you, or some people even watching this may buy Chinese medicines just like in their Chinatown and buy those kinds of things. So can you tell us a little bit of what would be the difference between people getting in terms of the potential for pesticides and toxicity in herbs that they might just buy off the shelf in their local Chinatown, let's say, to getting herbs from a practitioner?
Yeah, I mean most of the herbs in the conventional world are grown with pesticides.
Yeah.
There's pesticides put on the herbs and sometimes with fertilizers as well, obviously.
As with foods,
As with foods, exactly. It's the same thing with the food industry as it is in the herb industry. You have this sort of conventional thing, and then you have these, this sort of organic industry. So, unless something comes with some sort of certification in the sense of, in Australia it's the Australian Certified Organic, or connected with the United States, with the certification over there, that's one way of knowing for sure. And I don't mean just written organic, I mean it actually has to have the ACO stamp on it, which means that that company is being audited by the Australian certification.
Okay. So, what's the testing that you do what makes your company special?
Well, there was no standards, and so there's really no safety standards in Australia for just herbs dispensed over by practitioners in Australia. Obviously, we're all regulated by the government, but then there was no standard for these herbs. So we decided to set our own standard. So we built this policy called the 3-tier testing policy.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So what's the tiers?
So basically, so we what we're trying to do is just create as much transparency as possible. So whatever a practitioner is trying to buy from a wholesaler, we just basically want to show you exactly what you're buying and be completely clear about that. So the first tier is A grade, which just means it's a conventional herb. So it doesn't come with any certificate saying it definitely has no pesticides. Just we don't, we can't say that this has or hasn't been grown with pesticides or not. So we just call it A grade. It's conventional, but most importantly, it's the correct species. Quite often, there's a lot of adulteration with herbs. People using cheaper herbs to call it the same thing. There's a lot of confusion around that. So we're trying to clarify that.
Yeah. So that's an amazing thing that no one's ever done in Australia before.
Yeah.
And so that way, if you're meant to be getting a particular herb, and some practitioners wouldn't even know, they just because they're told by the company that this is the herb, so they think they're using the right herb, but they're not actually even really using the right herb. And it's not just that one practitioner; it's thousands of people that have been duped by some of these things, right?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons why there's adulterations. It could just be misidentification from species, or southern and northern varieties of something. The species quite often change, but the genus, the genus might be changed, but then the species will be different. In some cases there'll be a historical use for that. In other cases, it's literally just a mistake. And it's amazing how far the mistake can go back, and how. So it's our job to make sure that whatever we're saying that herb is actually the herb that the practitioner thinks. That's just step one.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So
but that's still a big step, right?
Step.
That's a massive
that's
step.
the first step. It's a massive step, but that's the first step.
So double A.
So double A is a sort of a semi-tested herb. So it's something that is tested for about 267 pesticides. So it's a sort of it's a Chinese pharmacopoeia standard. That is actually a standard. But it's not saying that they're not detectable. They're not grown there's not pesticides being sprayed on the herbs. It's just that they're at an acceptable level that's safety. It's a safe level. It's a safe level to consume on a regular basis, and it's just to put it into perspective how high that standard actually is. So Australian Certified Organic typically tests for 126 pesticides. This standard is 276.
Wow.
So even that standard is much higher than the certification.
Wow.
But the difference between pesticide testing and organic farming are two different things, which just more complicated issues. So that's the second tier testing. So, and then the third tier is basically all the other two plus a third test. So in the test of the 276, it can be an in-house test, but then of course companies can unfortunately have vested interest in falsifying these documentations. So we then take it to an independent laboratory. It's one of the top labs in the United States, and it's tested independently. So there's no vested interest in the results of these tests. And it's tested for over 400 pesticides, between 404, 408 pesticides. But the difference is what we're doing is that it has to come back with a non-detectable level. Absolutely non-detectable.
Right. Wow.
So this is different.
Okay. Wow, and that's amazing.
That's a guarantee.
Wow. Okay. So for people that maybe they're watching this and they're thinking, I'd love to be getting those kind of herbs. How would they know if their practitioner is using those kinds of herbs?
Yeah, I mean, they can ask their practitioner those questions. They can ask the questions. How do you know that? How do you know the safety of your herbs? What kind of do you have any documentation? Practitioners will often say, "Oh, don't worry, I've got the best herbs." But the patient, is well within their rights to request that information. So, we will, be sort of. It's hard for us to say. We can guarantee that this practitioner is using all these safe herbs. We're trying to do that, but it's a project that we're working on to say we vouch for this person. But we aren't an association where there's no standard that we're associated with, so it's a little bit presumptuous for us to do that. So we've got to be careful not to be too self-righteous.
But I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to the practitioner to do the best that they can to find the best quality and give the patients the best that they can.
And most practitioners do care about that. They want that, they know that they're therapists, and they got into this profession because they care. And you'll find that the more people know about this is actually available, the more people will say, wow, this is great, I've been waiting for this for a long time, and they'll come on board, and it's really exciting to see that change in the industry. Yeah, it just wasn't available before.
Yeah. So just a lot of people don't know, and that's why we're doing this podcast. We want more people to know what's available, and that there are different options out there. So we'll put the link to Simon's business and the stuff that you've been talking about in the description below, so people can go and have a read up of your AAA testing for themselves.
They can always read about those policies and what we have, and we're always open to help people understand the industry as much as possible. Yeah.
All right. So one of the questions that patients might not be aware of are sometimes, like, they might have the right, one of the things patients aren't sometimes aware of, I guess, is they might take the herbs, like they go and see their practitioner, they get the diagnosis, they get the herbs given to them, and then they come back and they say, oh, the herbs didn't really work that well, or they did, they didn't get the result they were looking for, or something like that. And so they think, oh, the herbs didn't work, and maybe they don't even come back and see their practitioner, they just throw the rest of the bottle in the bin or whatever, and that their practitioner doesn't even know that. And so in the patient's mind, they think, the Chinese medicine didn't work.
Yeah.
One of the issues sometimes is that they might have been given the right formula, like prescribed the right herbs, but the format in which the herbs they were taken might not be right.
Yeah, that's true.
So can you give us a little example about how that might work?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on the sort of process that people go through. So typically we have, the diagnosis. So if that's correct, and we assume, we do extensive training to get our diagnosis correct. Yeah. For example, we've done 9 years each, just as doing our studies, and then the herb ID is correct, so the practitioner's aware of this herb identification. Then they look at the quality of the herb, the quality of discernment. They say, yep, this is really good quality, it's a safe herb, etc., etc. And then this comes down to this administration of the herbs. So there's different forms of administration of the herbs. So these days we have a granulation, which is basically an extract that's mixed in with water and taken like that. It can come in single form or in formula form. Or you can get the raw herbs, which is basically just all the barks and twigs and leaves and everything like that. But obviously this is very strong medicine. The patient can cook that up. And then there's the pill form, capsule form, all sorts of other ways of administrating, tinctures, all sorts of stuff. But the original way that the Chinese medicine was practiced over these 2,000 years was this soup way of doing things. So what's called tang, or decoction, san, which is a powder, and a wan, which is a pill. So these different forms of administration act differently in the body, and that's where the art of Chinese medicine really comes in. A good way of explaining it is, it's like cooking. So if you said, oh, come over and let's have some pasta together, you would expect me to make all the pasta, cook it properly, put the salt in the water, wait a particular time, wait till it was al dente, strain it out, mix the sugo in and the sauce, and then serve it on a plate. When we do this, that's the whole thing. We put all the sticks in, we put them in, we boil it up, we have particular ways of cooking it, and it'll elicit different synergy, and it'll create different connections with those herbs. New compounds will be created when you take one herb and you mix it with the other. In the same way as you put, salt on your eggplant, or many examples like that. So it'd be very different if I gave you a cake for your birthday, and I just put some bag of flour on the table and cracked an egg for you, and put a little bit of sugar on the side and like some chocolate. And said, we all sang happy birthday to you, and then you had to eat that one, a spoon of flour, and then just mix it up in your mouth. It's going to taste very different, and your experience is going to be very different.
We might not be friends anymore.
You might not be friends anymore, But, we would certainly get at least one hip hip hooray. So that's very similar to the way that it's administered to the patient. So if you want to maximise the effect of a formula, of a herb, you do need to incorporate that artistry. Because, those checks and balances, as I said, diagnosis, okay, that's one thing. The herb identification, that's another thing. The quality of the herb, that's another thing. And the administration. If all these things are, all these things are correct, there's thousands of years of people using these formulas to treat these conditions. It's going to work. It's going to work. It's not a matter of, do I need to believe that it's going to work? It works. There's no question about it. This is not a cultural thing. This is a practical medicine that's been used to treat serious conditions for many, many, many years. So
So it's important to know that sometimes not every formula should be given out as a tablet or a pill. Not every formula should be given out as a powder or as even as a decoction.
Yeah, and as a patient, you should be guided by the advice of your practitioner, and you want to find a practitioner who is able to have that diversity in their thing. You shouldn't worry so much as a patient. It's too hard for me doing this and doing that. That's why you have gone to seek your practitioner. You've gone to them for that advice, and it's their duty of care to give you the best advice. And so it's very important to take that advice on as a patient. Yeah,
you have to follow what your practitioner is telling you to do, because there's been people that have done serious damage to their body by taking the herbs in the wrong way.
Absolutely.
But the practitioners told them to use it externally and they've balled it up and drunk it.
Exactly.
And even in Australia there's been cases where people have been seriously harmed from doing that and doing it incorrectly because they thought, so please don't watch this podcast. So everyone watching this podcast knows it's not a replacement for real medicine. And don't go to Dr. YouTube, go to your real real practitioner. So that's really great, so people can understand that there are lots of different ways, and sometimes it's good for you as a consumer of Chinese medicine to be informed about that there are just to know that there are different ways, and sometimes it does take you a lot more effort to make your herbs, but you don't have to do it like that forever. You might only boil the herbs up for a few days if that's what it takes. You don't have to be living like that all the time.
That's right.
And then I would rather do it like that and get better quickly than take it at an easier way, let's say, but be sick for a week.
That's correct. Yeah, it depends on the patient's condition as well. So if someone comes in, often I ask my patients, would you rather do it this way and get very quick, much quicker, or would you rather do this? But sometimes those formulas aren't designed to be taken over a long period of time and at a very low dose, or an easy way to administer this. They're very convenient. Like the reason we are ill sometimes is because whatever we've been doing needs to change. And so this is to elicit that change. This is to help that change for the patient.
And some people really like the process of making the herbs.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
Because you're involved in doing it. You're actually making your own medicine. You're not just opening a bottle and swallowing down a few pills.
You become part of the medicine. It's a medicine for the people. That's what it is.
Awesome. All right, great. So another question that people sometimes ask is, or they worry about, is the quality of herbs, especially when you say Chinese medicine, they think, it's coming from dirty old China. And it's like, Simon's been to China many times, I've been to China many times, and there's places in China that are absolutely pristine.
Oh, without a doubt.
Places in China that I've been to where you had to be escorted by a member of the Chinese government because foreigners aren't allowed there because they don't want other people messing up the ecosystem in that area. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's true. We I get a lot of questions myself, and our company gets a lot of questions. People come up to us at trade shows and all sorts of stuff and say, are these herbs grown in China? And when you say yes, they just walk away. And for a while I was thinking that's a really funny reaction, but then when I asked those people, excuse me, why are you adverse to that? And they say, well, because of the air pollution and the soil pollution and all these sort of things. And that's true. There are a lot of pollution. There are a lot of polluted areas, but got to keep in mind, China is a massive country, and they are, as you mentioned, there are absolutely pristine areas, and quite often the better medicinals are from those areas. So those ones that we get that we import that are exported by China are very, very, very beautiful herbs that come from absolutely pristine areas, and China's having huge advancements in the way in which they're controlling and sustaining these herbs. One example is this thing called woods grown. So it's going to regions where those particular herbs used to grow wild, so certain elevations, certain environment, and then those herbs have been harvested to the point of near extinction for some, and so there's the conscientious effort of these regions to go in and replant those areas with those herbs to help to sustain the balance of the ecosystem, and then sustainably harvesting those herbs and leaving some, and nowadays in China it's getting harder and harder to export a lot of these herbs because of these environmental protections. And so quite often there has to be environmental impact, studies done and approvals put in place before those companies or those growers can take those herbs out of that region. So it's very strictly controlled. Yeah.
I mean, it's a common misconception that people think the Chinese don't care, or they see something on the news about like, oh, you got hepatitis from the berries, so therefore it applies to everything there.
That's
and
true.
yeah, look, to be honest and clear, like we've probably both seen things where there are things where that people don't care in every industry. There are things where people, but there's a lot of industries where they do care, like more than they even have to, because they want to produce a really good quality product, and they want to, and like you said, the market's there for it now. That if they don't follow the guidelines, then they won't be able to produce.
Yeah, and China's middle class is going through the roof, and so there's demand for higher and higher quality herbs, and so this demand is going up and up and up, and of course, with the demand, people go out and make ways to make this farming more sustainable. I gave a lecture the other day about this topic, and when we went and saw some of these growers, they have these huge computer screens, and basically someone just watching the farms via camera 24/7, observing these farms to make sure that no one was putting pesticides, no one was putting fertilizers, no one was contaminating the soil, and that's just incredible. Yeah, I
guess there's more competition than ever for that high quality product, for that organic, that pesticide free, that sort of high quality product, which is really good for our industry. It's great.
And it doesn't mean that there aren't other places in the world growing these herbs. So America is doing an incredible job with all the herbs that they're growing. I mean, the American ginseng is a perfect example, but there's many herbs that are grown in organic farms, biodynamic farms, in regions of the right elevation, the right soil, pH, etc. And also in Australia, Dr. Brian May, who is out at RMIT, he's doing incredible research, and he's actually growing quite a few herbs in Australia, in Victoria. So for some people, there's certain herbs that you can do that. They can be moved to different areas, and they can grow like this. But in other areas, for certain particular herbs, they need a particular geographical position to become medicinal.
Yeah, right. So you couldn't just put it in a pot plant in your house and expect it to be the same medicinal plant.
That's right.
Yeah,
you need everything from the from astrological positioning to your geological positioning. Certain slopes of mountains, certain all these things that make a medicinal plant medicinal, and there's things that are in a medicinal plants that we don't really completely understand. We just know when it's done like this, it just produces this new alkaloid. This particular alkaloid is higher, and we can test some of these marker ingredients with modern testing methodology. Methodology.
So it's important for some herbs they can't be grown out of China.
They can't. For some herbs, there's this concept called D-Dao, which is the original growing area. So D-Dao is a concept in Chinese medicine that means that a particular herb from a particular area is the best from that region. And if it's grown in a different region, it's just not as good. And this concept's very hard for Western practitioners even, and patients, and the Western mind to understand this concept. I'll give you a story. I'll give you an example of. I met an Australian Indigenous elder, who came to see me as a patient, and he was an incredible individual, and he was telling me about his medicine, and he said, I hadn't seen such, I love herbal medicine, and this reminds me of where I come from, my country. And he was explaining to me, he brought in a plant, and I said, what's this plant? And what is it for? And he mentioned the name of the plant in his language. And I said, what's the English name? And he sort of looked at me like, that's a really strange question. And I said, well, maybe, if you can grow it, we can, can it be used medicinally and people can learn more about this plant somehow? And he said, oh, you don't understand. This plant has this name and is medicinal because it grows on this particular side of the river in a particular area with a particular slope, in a particular valley.
wow.
And that's the medicinal plant.
Yeah.
So that same herb, same species, same genus, same thing. If you put it on the other side of the river, it's not considered medicinal.
Wow.
So this is this concept of Di Jiao.
Yeah. And that's not even Chinese. He's not a Chinese medicine practitioner.
No, he's not a Chinese. But that concept
medicine.
ripples through all sorts of
Yeah.
herbal medicine.
Yeah.
It's something that that happens because of that that position that the positioning in the landscape.
Yeah. So you can't just take that plant back to the lab and grow it and replicate it.
No.
And so that's so important.
Impossible.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that concept you call that woods growing, right? That comes out of that deep.
Yeah, woods growing comes out of that concept. Yeah, and wildcrafting is very much that concept in its actual thing. But those areas that have these wildcrafting things, so that particular slope, that particular area, because that has a particular component that's very, very highly sought after. Unfortunately, what happens is in some cases, the herbs are removed.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, which causes further problems, and then certain herbs can actually get to the point where they're so endangered they become listed.
Yeah. Right.
So they get listed on this list called the CITES list.
Yeah.
And that's to look at those endangered species. Yeah.
So what happens with companies that want to they want to get the herbs from those areas, but they don't want to make the herbs go endangered?
Yeah. So some companies just don't have any CITES listed products, or you can apply and go through the CITES listed to make sure that those herbs have been grown not from those areas. They're not endangering. There's infrastructure put in place so that where this is actually a sustainable thing, and so it will come with a CITES certificate.
Okay, yeah. So they know they're replanting what's been taken, and they're looking after those areas.
Different ways of protecting it, making sure it's environmentally sustainable.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's good to know. So, in talking about the China thing, where people have this concept of things coming out of China not being safe, or they're not sure about it. Another question that I get asked a lot is, and when you say, I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, but what about the cruelty to animals that the Chinese do? And there's some herbs that don't you have to be participatory in that cruelty to animals to get those herbs? So one of those herbs that you've actually done, like Simon's business has actually done something about that, is called Jiao, which is donkey hide gelatin.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that and what decisions?
Yeah, I mean, cruelty to animals is not exclusive to any particular race or creed of people.
Of course,
it's everywhere, isn't it? And unfortunately, if there is that perception in the media about bile, gallbladders and bile and all these sort of things, and tiger's feet and you name it, any kind. It's very sensationalized, but it is a reality. A lot of those, some of those herbs are medicinal, or have been over the thousands of years of trial and error through Chinese medicine. So, this recently there was some footage of this, the cruelty to these donkeys, because in the same way as that we use gelatin from a cow, from the hide of a cow. They use the hide of a donkey. It's just a different way of getting the gelatin. It's a very particular kind of herb, and it's a very, very strong, very powerful herb to stop bleeding and to help supplement the blood. So it's very, very good for sort of blood loss in humans. But the herb, there are quite often some cruel practices that are done, and when sometimes the price of this herb has just skyrocketed. And so that has given birth to a not so nice kind of ethical business practices. So we decided that until we could guarantee 100% that this product was coming from has been looked at and assessed by animal welfare organisations. Then we weren't going to use that herb, and we weren't going to supply it at all in Australia. So we literally just stopped supplying that herb because there was, we trust who makes it for it, but we wanted to double check all that chain. Make sure that we weren't contributing
Right.
to the cruelty of those animals.
Yeah.
But of course, we have to come up with alternatives as well to that product. So we found a product that was suitable, and it had been checked by animal welfare organisations. It was from a bovine gelatin. It was all grass fed. It was we knew that it was ethically sourced, and it wasn't as good as the original herb, but we were more than happy, and we encourage practitioners to accept that compromise on the behalf of so that we aren't contributing to the suffering of those animals.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, there's not that many companies that would choose, I guess, not to make money over being ethical and having welfare for people and animals and that. So that's great.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, Simon, for being on the podcast today and chatting about all these different issues that they're so topical and they're so important, and I think it's good that we can all be informed and know more about what we're putting into our bodies in herbs and where our herbs come from and just the different options that are available. So you can check out Simon's website, Empirical Health. We'll put the link in the description below, and then you can check out the AAA testing that he does and all the different aspects of how he sources these ethical products and all the different things. So it's really fantastic to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Marie. It's been a pleasure.